fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. We got Mr. Smoker Joe Goldberg.
Yeah, no smoking for me. I'm out of town for about 2 weeks, and that smoker's going to be sitting there just calling my name. I didn't even smoke for Father's Day. I made lasagna. I don't know. No one wanted smoking. That's why I made actually a lasagna. I mean, this was...
Well, why are you cooking? It's Dad's Day. Huh? You're not supposed to cook.
I volunteered.
Because nobody else can cook.
You said it, not me. This isn't going to be... No one's going to hear this, right?
No, of course not.
I mean, no one's going to hear it.
Well, we're not going to tell anybody.
We're going to hear it because we got Megan on. So
yeah.
Now I'm done for. So.
Yeah, they'll be listening to Megan. They don't care that you cook.
Yeah.
Nobody in your family can cook. That's all right. Yeah, that's all right. Well, so first time joining the show, we've got Megan Abbott, and her latest book, El Dorado Drive. So welcome to the show, Megan.
Thanks so much for having me. This is already fun, so I'm excited.
It's going to go down from here. This is as good as it gets. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's as good as it gets. That's
There's a lovely parting gift. Please
yeah.
left.
Okay, tell us how it ends, and then we're going to wrap her up. That's good. No, listen, you've been around a little bit, and you've got a name, and you're writing books and stuff like that. Does that put a pressure on you when you come out with a new book? Now, are you feeling kind of like you have to perform a certain way or get a certain amount of success every time you write a book?
I guess it always feels dangerous to think that way. It's not that it doesn't creep into your head, but I've never been able to write to trend or fashion. I can only really write the books I can write, so that kind of saves me from that kind of anxiety. I just feel like I have to follow the path that the muse takes me, if you will. So I try to get that stuff out of my head. Of course, it's sort of hard. When I started, my first book came out 2005. There was no social media, there were no podcasts really of note. And so, you were more publishing into a vacuum. But now, you are more aware of, the impact your book does or does not make. So, but I try to like keep my blinders on and focus on the work, as best I can.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of good that way. I think that the more you can avoid all that outside noise, the better, because then you can focus more on what you're doing than all that stuff, because it can take you in places that might not be good. Look at Joe.
Yeah.
I'm a wanderer.
Yeah, look how he...
But Megan, you said that you don't write the cultural trends, but isn't that kind of what you're looking at or where you go? I mean, it's sort of like you said, you have a certain cultural bent to your books. That's kind of differentiates you from everybody.
Yeah, no, I would say I probably do write the cultural trends, but not necessarily publishing trends.
Okay.
For instance, like this is, everyone wants this kind, they'll always say, this is the kind of book that everyone wants now, based on the last book that kind of surprised everybody. But cultural trends, I do think they sneak in. I mean, I hadn't really, for instance, in this one, I started it before, not that we're technically in a recession, but I started it before we were even at the prospect of, tariffs, etc., anxiety, particularly piercing anxiety about the stock market. But it is a book about money, and people's anxiousness about it. And it's set in 2008, which was the last major recession. So I guess in some ways I am paying attention to what's going on, and it's seeping in somehow.
Is that where it starts? Is that idea, and then you sort of build everything around that?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, this one, it certainly was an awareness. I was sort of conscious during the pandemic of all this sort of spike in people involved in various sort of money-making operations, MLMs, and various sort of pyramid schemes, one might say. Social media has really given rise. It used to be back in the day of Mary Kay Cosmetics that this was all like hand-to-hand direct sales, but now through social media, there's just been a real rise of, and at times where people are, like the pandemic, worried about where their next paycheck is coming from, and they're kind of looking for a way to shore up their income and get involved in something that may or may not be legitimate. So I was sort of following that trend and all these docu-series about, MLMs in general, multi-layer marketing schemes, people selling essential oils or leggings or etc. And particularly how they were targeted to women. And that's sort of historically been the trend. But it was really interesting to me because it was also a lot more suburban women were getting involved in it, and that sort of interested me. So that it did sort of come from a fascination about that, so I started to think about a group of suburban women that are all, for the first time in their life, maybe under financial stress and sort of get involved in something and maybe get it over their head.
Yeah, because so I would imagine that this whole social media thing really helped all these sort of things blow up, like, selling of things, essential oils, and doing all these marketing and stuff.
Definitely, because you're hitting people right where, it's opposed to in the past where it might be your friend who tells you about this exciting new opportunity, right? That's how it used to be. Someone in the parent-teacher association would pull you aside and say, do you need to make some extra money? And you trust that person perhaps, or at least know them. But the spread of it on social media, it's usually strangers, and there's something very intimate about it on your phone. It feels very enticing, I suppose, that just by a few clicks you could become involved in something and make some money, and your network of people expands suddenly, and there's a lot of solidarity in some of these groups. You feel like you're connected to these other people. And social media, of course, is very good at giving the illusion that you know people that you don't really know. Yep. So I think it's really been responsible for, this sort of huge proliferation of them, and more dangerous because now there's all these, Zelle and PayPal and Venmo, like you just give people giving their money away willy-nilly, and very different from the old days where you'd have to go to the bank and take out some cold hard cash if you wanted to take your chances.
Yeah, I teach social media, and this is like kind of the subject of my next book. It's kind of like the undercurrent of, because people join social media to be part of a community.
Yeah.
That's why it was built, interactivity and community. So that's kind of what your book is about, basically, interactivity and community. So it is hitting something.
Yes, I think so. And it was one of the reasons I said it before that, but in awareness that people will be reading it in a time of that, where that this would be something at your fingertips. So, which makes it all the more dangerous. And they're particularly good at targeting women, often with sort of the language of feminism, like you can empower yourself.
Right.
You can make your own money. You don't need a man. This sort of lingo that is very popular on social media, and I think kind of insidious.
Yeah, my daughters went down the Lulu Row rabbit hole.
Yes, big one.
Yeah. So that was a fun time. But that, as a father and supportive of social media, it's okay. Wasn't as bad as it could have been. So
true. They got out before they had it.
They got it out, right? But there's a thing there, and people know I ask questions on the show to help me write. So
yeah, it's all about Joe.
It's all about me. Come on, this guy right here. So what I find interesting about your characters is you've pinpointed a need. All right, and almost all of the way through, there's something that they need. There's a temptation. There's something that they're looking for, and I'm interested in how you, first of all, sort of select that, but say, how do you present that to a reader
Yeah.
that this individual need
Yeah.
so well.
No, that's a great question. I think about that a lot because my first several books, I was really inspired by film noir or the noir tradition, which is always based around these really elemental drives that we all have, desire, greed, revenge. And I think that these kind of operations play on that. They're really like the stuff you can't get rid of. There's this sort of, and I think money is maybe the most piercing of that because we all form our ideas about what money means at a very early age, usually based on our parents, what money was like in our household, whether we felt there was enough of it or not enough, we were aware of it. And you carry that with you for the rest of your life. Some people, there was never enough money, so when they have it, they spend it, wildly. Other people who grew up without it are like immensely careful, but it's really primal stuff that's hard to untangle. And so for the women in the book, I really wanted to sort of get into what money meant for them, because it's never just money. Is it power, independence, security, freedom? Like, what is it for them? Because you're right, there's something really core and deep about what they want, the hole they want to fill, the thing that they feel like lost. These are women in their 40s. A lot of them, are coming off divorces, or they're empty nesters, or their situation has changed, and money has taken on a different quality to them. And I think that's the kind of stuff that really interests me.
How do you relate to your characters? Are you hearing them? Do you feel them? Do you picture them?
I do, and I can't really write the book till I've at least got the main characters sort of where I can hear them in my head. It sounds so woo-woo, but it really is in a way true. It's not like I get visitations, I don't believe that they exist without me, but I have to, have a sense of how they talk, how they operate, and then through the writing of it, it gets clearer and clearer. And so this is really about three sisters, so they all are survivors of the same childhood. I always think of siblings as veterans of the same war, so they all have the same battle wounds. What they do with that may be different based on their life choices, but that's, once I sort of start to understand that, and it's really only understanding it as I write, but then it kind of locks into place.
And so the dialogue, does it come that way as well, like through their voice in your head?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does, hey? So, have you woke up lately in the middle of the night and found a shovel by the bed or anything?
Well, ironically, I do have a shovel in my office, but that's a long story that I won't get into.
Okay, yeah. So tell us about that. Is there blood on it?
We got time.
I don't think the camera can quite see it, but I do have probably too far.
Oh, she's got a shovel. I saw it was on the
wall.
wall.
Okay. It's a golden shovel. There it is.
Is it a skull laying there?
Yeah. You shouldn't have shown that still. If I got to call the sheriff.
I like to have a lot of things to look at, but that was a gift from a friend of mine. But it was actually inspired by I'm a big fan of David Lynch, by the Twin Peaks TV show, and it played a critical role in that. So you too, okay. So,
I love the pilot for Twin Peaks. Step back.
Amazing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
probably the best 2 hours of television written, top 10.
I think so. I agree. And so I thought that would be inspiration. But why do you ask about the shovel by the bed?
I'm just curious. Just if you're hearing voices, maybe, can you... Maybe one day, all of a sudden, you wake up and it's like, oh, who did that? And then someone in the background goes, I did. And then you're like, oh, great. And then
that was an uncanny read on me, I must say.
That's why he writes true crime type of stuff. He reads people.
True. And that actually, as a kid, that was really my first love was true crime, and it's remained that way. There's sort of a true crime that was a loose inspiration for this book, which was a woman who was involved in one of these clubs, and was, a crime occurs. I won't reveal too much, but there's something about the texture of real life cases. It's usually some small detail that inspires me, and that is sort of usually the springboard to the book. So I do love true crime.
Yeah, so do I.
I was to say, do you have a true crime follow up on that one now? Because now we're in your sweet spot. So
No, not really. No.
yeah,
That's just,
because you get so many books going.
yeah.
Ask Al questions. He's an expert.
Yeah. So as a kid, did you follow true crime?
No, not at all.
Came later.
Much later. I was a slow grower, you might say, because I'm an autistic kid, as they say, and growing up in the '60s wasn't really good for my condition.
No.
No, they pretty much ignored you, or they thought you were being bad,
Right.
or being, it's kind of weird how people perceive what it is. And so it took a long time. I started a lot later in my life at doing radio and writing. So, but the good thing, the advantage of it is I can sit down with these killers in prison and I feel nothing.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect me like a lot of people do when they're telling you these weird things. I don't get all freaked out.
Right.
So that's an advantage.
It is. It definitely is. And I'm sure that it makes them respond in a very different way. Because they know they're not going to be able to manipulate you.
Yeah, and that turns out really good in some cases and not so good in others.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because, it sometimes if they've got a real aggression, it's about them
Yes.
and not about me. So it's not a good mix. But the others, they kind of can open up and talk about things, which is kind of gross at times.
Yeah. And that's
Just
heavy.
That's why you're a
It's
bestseller.
heavy. It's heavy to carry with you. I often think even in particular parts of a book I'm writing or the research I'm doing for the book, if it's very upsetting, it does kind of sit in your head a long time, and sometimes you just want you kind of have to write your way out of it.
Of course. For me, what would sit in my head longer is when you're talking to victims or survivors of these, and then counter to the person. That's actually the ones that stick with you. Even books later, you still think something will come back and it'll remind you. That doesn't seem to go away. Whereas the killers seem to go away.
Yeah.
I mean, and
And
then
crime, that's who did it.
yeah, that's it, and then and they become the celebrities, which is kind of weird.
It's really strange, and it's I feel like that's consistent through the history of the genre, even when it was in the sort of penny presses. There was always a kind of, it's almost impossible not to glamorize it, there's just this sort of desire to move papers in that case, or in the case now with some of these docuseries, or certainly the movies, there's just always tendency to be more interested in the killer than in the victims. It's been one of the good things, I think, in the last few years has been trying to move away from that and tell victim stories instead.
Yeah, it's true, but it's not. Because just in my because in my experience with books that, like one of the last ones I focused a lot on all the victims. I even give one a chapter, and I give the cop a chapter. I had a lot of stuff. It was really based on the family that was murdered, but it had his interview at the end. But that's what everyone talks about.
Yeah.
It even though everyone says, yeah, it's great, you're focusing on the family, everyone cared about the interview with the guy. It was kind of weird. So, anyway, that's just...
There's a question in this, because I had like 4 questions, but I'm going to skip that and go with the conversation. You have a little bit of violence in your books,
Yes.
right? So how do you handle that? Or are you thinking about how the reader responds to that then as you're writing it up?
I try to, I guess as someone who's consumed a lot of this, I I try to write into my fears, which, I don't ever want to be exploitive, and I tend just, there's certain things I don't write about, children being harmed, and that's obviously necessary, especially in true crime. You have to, but I don't tend to do that. I don't tend to deal with sexual assault. But I want it to feel real, that it can't be dismissed. You want it to, I don't want to glamorize. I want that sort of, I want the kind of ugliness of it to, be apparent. My brother was a prosecutor, and he always talks about how, especially because I'm often dealing with people who aren't criminals but commit a crime, domestic dispute, interpersonal, and it leads to this crime. And he always talks about how hard it is to really kill someone, and what it means to do it and to go to that place. And I always feels like a responsibility in some way to deal with that. In this book, you're seeing the aftermath, you're seeing a crime scene, and of a character you care a lot about. So it was really important to me that it be vivid and upsetting and not just glossed over. This isn't going to be dismissive of the toll of it all. So that's sort of the way I think about it. But I try to do it. I'm always looking for the small detail that tells the story more than a lot of detail about various injuries, etc. The small telling detail of, a spilled box of cereal on the floor where the victim is found, things like that sort of bring it forward and make it feel real, that there's a cost to all this. So that I think about a lot.
Yeah, cereal's getting expensive, so.
But you got the gallows humor, the true crime writer.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well,
he walks
years,
to the valley of death.
Yeah, there's so many, after you deal with so many, you got to have some outlet,
Sure.
Yeah, it makes it better. It's not a disrespect. Sometimes people think it is, but it's not. It's just a release of the stress and tension, and all that stuff. And how do you do that? How do you deal with that? Because this is very personal to you, and all these things about life and characters and stuff like that. How does it affect you? How do you come out of doing a book? Do you feel it's changed you somewhat when you finish a book?
Yeah, I do. Particularly certain scenes in the book that take longer to write, that you're kind of in that space longer. And it is hard to shake off. But I always try to. No, I don't consider. I mean, they're crime novels, but I'm really interested in the people. And I try to sort of stay with them, and their, for instance, that gallows humor, in this book, I think there's a lot of that, because that is how we deal with death, particularly in a family. It's often a survival technique that we all together will, find a way to get through this. So to me, they're really books about characters who've endured something or who've gone to some place and come out the other side. So I try to focus on them and to allow room for humor and pleasure and that kind of thing. So as much as I can. It's always a hard thing, because people will ask me often, like, why do you dwell? I'm sure I'll go the same question. Why do you dwell in these dark spaces? And there's no good answer for it. Is there?
No.
Yeah, I can think of one. We like the darkness.
I mean, that
the dark
is
is
the true
stronger
answer.
than the light. The light. Darth Vader is stronger than Luke,
It's
right?
true.
The dark
It's
side.
true. It's true. And you can't sort of fight it. So you just have to sort of handle it the best way you can, and try to be true and real and authentic in your books, and honest and play fair, I suppose, too, is something I always think about.
Right. Yeah. But you you get to select the ending in a way. You get
That's right.
to make sure that justice is served in a way that isn't in true life a lot
Well,
of times.
yes, though rarely is it served in my books. I will say.
I'm trying to be polite, but yeah.
I know. But having a brother as a prosecutor, I fully understand how rare that is. But to, I do get to decide where I end the book. And I do think about that a lot. So I think that's very true.
Well, you kind of answered this, but I still want to ask because it's important to me. Once again,
It's all about you.
me.
It's all
It's
about
all about
you.
me. Come on, stand back up. I have difficulty with the box of cereal, with the detail. Sometimes I am just blowing down the tracks. I need to get this character to this point, and I don't care about the light bulb flickering or making a simile they look like an animal. So, but it's so important, and you're so good at it. So how is that just how your mind works, or what is it that you search for in your writing that brings up that delicious detail that everybody loves?
Yeah, I think I was really a movie loving kid, and I do tend to think visually, and it sounds like, yeah, you too. So I do think about that a lot, and so painting the picture for the reader is a big part of it for me, and so those details I think always sort of create the visual. I'm always trying to conjure. I have a picture in my head. How am I going to transmit that to the reader? And so it's sort of like filling in, like with a painting or like a photo being developed, where it starts to, go from a blur into something more realized. So I'm always trying to do that. So, because I always think too, that those are the details that the reader knows in their own life too. So they can't separate themselves from it. It's very grounded. They have that. They have, they bought that cereal. They bought, I think it's Lucky Charms. I can't remember.
Lucky Charms. I said Lucky Charms. Yeah. I haven't read the book yet.
Yes. So, so it's just trying to bring it directly to the person reading it so that they can't dismiss it, so that it isn't, I wouldn't say my books are escapist. I guess they're escapist in a way, because you really will enter a world, because I really try to create a specific mood. It's sort of one of the reasons I love David Lynch, is it's such mood based. But I want it to be grounded. So I'm always looking for those specifics, and you have to choose them carefully, right? Like you could talk about everything that you're seeing, but you want to keep the momentum, right? The pacing, right? So it's like you have to pick just the right one. It's almost like there's a science to it, but I usually know it when I know the detail when when it comes into my head. And I don't know if you are all this way, but it's often when I'm stuck at the computer and I go for a walk, or I, go for, a drive, or I'm not in New York, so I'm not driving, but I go on the subway, and then you think of this thing, and you think this is what it is. It's, I'm a big believer in the writing we do when we're not writing, when we're not at the computer.
Right. My neighbor knows that when I'm milling around the house a couple of laps, they know that I'm in the mode.
Completely.
Yeah, they know not to call the cops.
They do it anyway. I would call cops on me too.
Yeah. No, but those specific details. It for me, I always think about things that mean something to me when I'm sick. This sounds weird, but when you're ill, how certain details come to your mind.
Yes.
And and they take longer to process. I don't know if that makes sense. And
yeah,
those are the ones I like to key on, because then when you have a character, it means something to them.
Yes.
Like that cereal might mean something to them, might happy or angry or whatever, and that's how you can tie it into their emotion. That's, but what do I know?
Yeah, I think that's right, because it's also like when a crime enters everyday life of people that aren't, in the mob, say, aren't actively involved in any, just regular folks. It's this real fissure. It's this like tearing open of the everyday life and changing everything forever. And I always think of that when I see crime scene photos, and you're seeing like the little details, like someone's like, they got all the cords coming out of their TV or something, and they're all sort of in chaos. Or these details we all recognize from our own life. And there's something about this being a crime scene, this sort of so pedestrian setting has just sort of been torn apart. And that there's something so haunting about that to me. And maybe why, as a kid, the true crime was so scary to me, because it was the first clue that that this sort of curtain could be pulled back and you could enter this space of terror, really.
Yeah. Joe was in the mob. Did you know that?
Yeah, a mob of people who all we did is eat In-N-Out burger.
Well, restaurants have a long history of mob involvement.
Yeah, I know. This is Chicago.
The Chicago
Nice
way.
Yeah. That's why you have beef sandwiches.
Yeah.
Can I ask one question though? And maybe you've answered this, but when a reader is done with the Megan Abbott book, are they more entertained? Are they getting the message? What is it that you think they go when they close the book? They go, aha, fill in the blank.
Yeah, I'm always surprised.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I never really know. I often think that, is this too dark? And then everyone's like, that was so much fun. So I never really know. But what I'm always looking for, to me, the key of the ending is that the resolution should feel surprising, but then inevitable. So that I played fair, that it makes sense if you think about it, even if you didn't sort of see it coming. It feels true to the characters, so that it isn't that ending where who did it turns out to be someone that you never guessed, and then they have to explain their motive that hasn't existed in the book at all, or you really feel kind of hoodwinked. I never like those stories because I feel sort of cheated. So I'm always looking for a surprise, but a feeling of inevitability. I would say that there's never really closure. I try to leave it in in this book in particular, there's some kind of restoration of something, and after everything bad that happens. But it isn't always that way. But I always feel like, once we finish the book, we have to kind of surrender it to the readers, and it's really up to them to decide what it means. Not that I go on Goodreads and check it out, but always the bad path for any writer. But I feel like they get to decide. It's very the democratic thing about books is that you leave it in the reader's hands.
Yeah. Well, you do that. I'm not. Well, listen.
Finality.
Yeah. So who dies at the end? No.
To find out.
That was our deal.
Yeah. Well, listen. So, speaking of reviews and all that stuff, do you like to have fans, readers, and all that stuff follow you or contact you, or do you have a website? Do you have social media? Where do they go?
Yeah, I have a website, Megan Abbott, 2 B's, 2 T's. Like, you used to be able to say like Abbott and Costello, but no one knows Abbott and Costello anymore.
I do.
Okay, good. I'm in good company. So I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Megan Abbott Books is where I am, and you can also email me through my website. Don't email me angry notes.
No.
That sometimes happens. Or sometimes I get the request from a prisoner who read my book in prison and would like to talk to me, which is always very tempting, but I haven't done it yet.
Oh, geez, it's fun. Come on.
Yeah, I can't say I'm not curious, but
well,
maybe I could vet them by you first.
Yeah, I'll escort.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
Well, hey, listen, we appreciate you coming on, and I know you got lots going on. So the book, Dorado Drive, and that's Megan Abbott. So thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, and thank you for the burger and beef recommendations too before we got started.
Send me an email. I'm on all those things too.
Yes, next time I'm in Chicago, I'm going to hit you up.
It's all good for me.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.